Hello, I'm William Gallagher, and this is Jane Austen week on 58 Keys, the whole week's worth of videos. So Monday's 58 Keys, the writing workshop video, which is now out at time of recording. Well, actually, that was really easy to do. It's just some of the many writing lessons I think I've learned from her. She might disagree. I think I've learned her. And then Friday's, at the moment, forthcoming video, there will be links below both ways, is about scripts, and that was a doddle. Emma Thompson's dramatisation of Sense and Sensibility. It's just such a good read. I mean, okay, it's also, for writers, it's also replete with writing lessons. I think it's perfect, but chiefly it's just such a good read. But that's Friday. And this is now. This is the OG 58 Keys. This is the 58 Keys that's for writers who usually write on Macs and iPhones and iPads, and I'm reasonably confident in saying Jane Austen didn't write a lot with an Apple Pencil. Although, okay, it's a stretch. Work with me. If she did write with an Apple Pencil on an iPad, then as of the forthcoming iPad OS 26, well, she would get the new calligraphy option. She'd also have that really unsettling thing of her quite neat handwriting being automatically smoothed out. I'm never sure what I think about that, but then I don't have to be, because my handwriting is impossible to read. It's impossible to be smoothed out, really, so it's never an issue. I just type. But okay, then to imagine if Jane Austen had access to Apple Maps. I'm never going to call Jane Austen lazy, exactly, but if she had Apple Maps or Google Maps or Waze or any of them, she could surely have looked up place names a bit better, couldn't she? So instead of, temporary placeholders, writing them as Dashshire or L Dash, she could have just checked the names right there as she wrote, instead of, presumably, putting it off to later and then doing what we all do and not doing it later. Well, actually, for that matter, Lizzie Bennet, right? Lizzie Bennet, she could have checked out Pemberley on rightmove.com. Fanny could have, well, you know what Fanny was like, scoped out the local nightlife around Mansfield Park. Yeah. Lydia Bennet would have been all over Instagram, wouldn't you? Everybody would have known everything straight away. Emma could have created, this writes itself. Anyway. Writing, yes, good point. Hard to see a Microsoft Word grammar checker letting Dashshire go by without an angry red line shortly before it crashes and leaves all of us thinking that quill pens do still have a place. Never had this trouble. Hard as well not to see that AI would have automatically inserted the full spelling of the place name for her and declined to credit any of its sources, and probably also offered a photo of the wrong town. Although, actually, photos, if I can find it, right, and if I don't think I look too bad in it, I'll add a photo somewhere over here, maybe way over there, of me in the town of Bath, standing on the doorstep of the house Jane Austen lived in there, and being as excited as a fanboy. A fanboy more than 2 centuries after she lived there, and I'm standing on that step as giddy as if she were about to pop out and tell me to go away. That house, by the way, it's up the hill in Bath from the Jane Austen Museum, and I imagine the museum is where it is because it couldn't afford to buy our actual house. I mean, not at Bath prices. The museum is very good. There's a video that's a bit iffy, but most of it's very good. Great poem on the wall, but yeah. And the house is apparently very much like Jane Austen's, but it isn't. It's like 3 doors down. Yeah, and he said actually her old house is now a dentist. So yeah, I'm thinking it too. It is a tooth universally acknowledged. The thing is, there's no acknowledgement on that house that it was ever hers. There isn't anything. And this is a dentist. You'd at least expect some plaque. There's also a house in Winchester, since we're talking about houses, the house where she died. And this year that's been open to the public for the first time. And I only learnt this after the entire season was sold out. I think it probably only took 5 minutes, but there you go. I'll put links to the Bath Museum and the Winchester house in the video description. Winchester is going to be definitely both for you and for me, and hopefully for next year. And we both need to put out some kind of RSS alert on Jane Austen news, so we don't miss out again. Good point. But that's showing me, well, that's kind of reading, isn't it? Alerts and stuff. Back to writing. You have to wonder whether Jane Austen, if she had an iPad to write on, would she have had the discipline to not get distracted? I mean, she wrote all those novels by hand. It's not like she's a slacker, but an iPad would mean that with a touch, she could save her writing mid-sentence, any moment she liked, any time it was getting a bit difficult, and go back to reading any of her favourite books on Kindle or Apple Books. Anyway, 2 centuries ago, right, I think you also have to wonder whether Jane Austen would have self-published if she'd had an iPad and if she'd had the internet and if there'd been Amazon to print it and print on demand and all that stuff. Thing is, there was self-publishing back then of a sort. Anyway, I should say, just to remind you, Jane Austen was born in 1775 and she died in 1817, so just shockingly enormous loss to literature. And I should also definitely say the reason I'm both scrambling to find technology reasons to talk about her writing and that I'm now trying to build up some suspense over her possible self-publishing options in the 18th and 19th centuries is that this year is the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen's birth. Katie Lumsden, on her Books and Things YouTube channel, she does a Jane Austen month every July, and here I am stealing a shorter, slightly less obviously relevant version of her idea. But okay, self-publishing. Self-publishing in Jane Austen's day would really have just meant her paying for the book to be published. It wouldn't mean, for example, her spending hours with ye olde scrivener preparing a manuscript, or ye olde, even older affinity publisher, laying out every double-page spread herself. She could have paid, she could therefore have self-published, and arguably that's what she did with Sense and Sensibility. She took the financial risk of publishing and was rewarded by it being a success and her getting all of the royalties. Great. She did not self-publish, though, with Pride and Prejudice. There she sold the rights to a publisher who, frankly, had a very nice life because of her, while she did not. And she didn't self-publish Northanger Abbey. But in that case, there was a publisher who bought the book, right? But they sat on it for something like 13 years before grudgingly selling it back to Jane Austen's brother around 1816. Northanger Abbey, if you don't happen to have read it yet, well, you must, because it's just, it's laugh aloud funny. But it wasn't published until after her death. More than 200 years ago, then, there was the same battle between publishing and self-publishing. There was promotion issues, there were rights, there were the same difficulties. It's just that Jane Austen didn't have the benefit of, say, Vellum to publish directly from her Mac. She also didn't have an iCloud backup, which I think was a terrible mistake, because you've got to imagine that if she had, Cassandra Austen might not have been able to destroy quite as many of her sister's letters as she did. You can get the published letters, the surviving published letters, on Kindle and Apple Books, but I tell you, that's one case where it's better to get them as ebooks, I think, than in paperback, because with my paperback copy, you feel the number of pages dwindling down, and you know this is not going to end well. You know you're getting close to a death. Funny letters, clever ones, the pictures of perfection line. It's something about her being conversational writing rather than constructed prose that makes you feel close to her, and then it's all over. It's just horrible. But great letters on the way. And speaking of letters, it's at least very likely, if you don't happen to already know this, and I think you're looking like me like you do, that Pride and Prejudice was written as an epistolic novel, a novel told only in letters. And when you know that, right, you can at least imagine that you see it because of how, for one instance, Mr. Collins, he's set up for us with this wonderfully awful letter, set up so that we can anticipate his arrival later and then relish how he lives up to everything we expect. Or possibly, what did I think of this first? More famously, Mr. Darcy's letter to Lizzie Bennet, which is, as writers, I think is really interesting because technically that's exposition, But Jane Austen writes it so well that it's like we're reading it alongside Lizzie Bennet as she reads it for the first time, feeling the burning anger and at times the burning shame, always the doubt of whether it's right, always the certainty that unfortunately it might be. It's a couple of pages, plot, but done superbly. But anyway, assuming she did switch from letters to mostly straight narrative prose, well then presumably she did so by having, you know, one stack of papers next to one another, if she copied anything at all from the original draft. I have this picture, I have this image of her getting to that Darcy letter and thinking, no, that works as it does. Moving it over. If she were writing today, okay, then she could do the same with a wide monitor like mine, have them side by side, or she could use Scrivener on any Mac or any iPad. Scrivener's really good for showing you, for example, chapters 2 and 17 side by side or one atop the other. And that same feature means you could chuck the old draft into a Scrivener research folder and have it there available to see as you write the new one. Or actually in any Mac word processor, if she had Time Machine backups, for example, she could be writing away and then remember, oh yeah, that was a good bit 2 drafts ago, and just bring up that earlier draft, copy out the bits you want, send the old draft away again. And while I think of Jane Austen as a novelist, on account of she's a novelist, she did write at least one play. Sir Charles Grandison or The Happy Man. She wrote it in 1793 when she would have been, 18? And it was not great. It's kind of closer to her juvenilia, her younger writing, but that does also actually mean it's very funny. Still, today, if she wanted to do that, she could stick with Scrivener and use its screenwriting format. She could do it in Microsoft Word and lose her mind on the way with all the styles, or she could use Final Draft. Now, no matter what the Final Draft company says, it seems to me that their script writing software is really, it's really meant for film and television, not stage or, say, radio. But maybe Jane Austen would disagree with me. And there's a thing. You can't ever know how someone would react to anything, even if you think you can predict it. But Final Draft, Scrivener, even Word, they're all better than she had. We could keep going, right, with the comparisons. What would she set up as buttons on her Stream Deck, for example? Got to figure that one out. What podcasts would she be listening to today or writing today? Or late at night, writing away if her candles blew out or just run down? Couldn't she just use the torch on her iPhone? But all of this nonsense, every bit of it, it just makes me appreciate even more what she actually did. The real thing I think to think of is how great her writing is and how you can read any of it. You can read all of it on a whim. Kindle and Apple Books and Kobo and Libby or online on the web. All of her writing instantly available, and instantly available a quarter of a millennium after she scratched out each word in ink on paper or parchment, wherever it was. I don't expect my writing to last a quarter of an hour, but I can try. Now, as this first goes out in July 2025, there's one more 58 Keys to come in the Jane Austen week, and the links to all three will be below. Well, you don't need a link to this one. And the last one is the Friday Script Club. Like I said, Emma Thompson's superb dramatisation of Sense and Sensibility. I believe it was her first screenplay. I know that it took around 5 years to write, and like I say, I think it's perfect. I will be enthusing about it in slightly more detail and pointing, and more usefully, I think, pointing you at the best places to go get and read it in this Friday's 58 Keys Script Club. But for now, that's it for the 58 Keys about Jane Austen's iPad and other stories. Thank you very much for watching. Now take care of yourself. Write more, and I'll see you soon.